So I'm going to start with this slide that really talks about our philosophy and why we think this is important. So quiet matters. That's the name of our newsletter. It matters to the health and well-being of all living things. It helps children think and learn. It helps us to be calm, thoughtful, and productive, encouraging to others, civil, courteous interaction, and connecting us with nature. We live in a pretty noisy world, and we think that quiet not only matters, it's extremely important to our health and well-being. We started in 2013, some of you may know, with 3 people. We have grown since then to, I believe, more than 50 people at this point, a core group of staff, and then a lot of advisors and program participants. And everybody's wonderful. And I'm so grateful that we have them. It's just been amazing. Most of the people that work with us do so on a volunteer basis. And I think almost everybody has been with us for a number of years now and is hanging in there and continues to be motivated. In 2013, when we started in the land care area with leaf blowers, mowers, string trimmers, and all of the noisy gas equipment that's bothering so many communities. But we quickly grew to cover a lot of different areas of noise with people, mainly professionals from the medical, scientific communities, the legal community, that were concerned with noise and the lack of ways to address it. So today we have our Quiet Coalition that really writes our blogs, provides some consulting services, Quiet Healthcare, Quiet Empowerment, which is a community assistance program to the extent that we can serve communities. That's also an issue that we're grappling with. As much as we would like to help every community, it's very difficult given bandwidth and current funding issues. Quiet American Skies, or aviation program. And then we have 2 newer programs that just started, a Quiet Streets program headed by Mary Titijan, a Quiet Restaurants program headed by Neil Donenfeld. And as we move into the future, we're hoping to start a program for children. And we want to start a nature program as well, but we have to be careful and stay focused on what's ahead of us because it's plenty. Just to go over our mission, again, we promote quiet as a valuable natural resource. We work to reduce harmful noise and related pollution, and all this to create quieter, more sustainable, and more livable communities. We're interested in really all areas of noise, whether it's transportation, land care, construction, indoor sources, outdoor sources, and certainly environmental justice communities that tend to bear a disproportionate burden of noise as well as related pollution. Our approach is unique in that it is evidence-based. I'm a healthcare scientist and environmental scientist. We have groups of scientists and a growing network of scientists and physicians that we work with. We are systems oriented. We know that there's not a silver bullet. We look at these issues as having interconnections with other social issues, political issues, industry issues, and so forth. And we look at the whole thing to try and figure out how can we approach this. We're also driven to find solutions. We don't want to just complain about all the problems we have in noise. We want to try and figure out ways to solve them. And we take a collaborative approach. Even when there's people on the other side of the table, we try hard to engage them with evidence and say, what can we do together to make something happen and solve issues? And very much a carrot rather than a stick. Increasingly, we're growing our activities through collaborations with other organizations. And what you see here is a list of some of those collaborators. AGSA, the American Green Zone Alliance, that we've worked with in land care now for 11 years. We're doing more litigation support and policy support work with groups like Earth Justice, Conservation Law Foundation, Physicians for Social Responsibility. And then our latest collaboration in the land care area is with Wild Ones to bring in not just what we do in gas-powered equipment to more sustainable practices, but also bringing in things like native plants, pollinator gardens, and so forth into what we do. Our work sits at the juncture of science, policy, and community. So we don't just do the research, we really try and translate that to policy in order to help communities. Specifically, what we do is listed here. We do a lot of education and outreach. I'm sure some of you have been to our conferences or workshops. We have a number of policy initiatives. I'll give you some examples as we keep talking. Legal initiatives, same thing. And then a variety of other activities, research, community assistance, consulting, expert testimony, and then communications in the form of helping media communicate noise and related pollution as public health issues and bring this to greater national attention. Importantly, we follow the science, and what is really encouraging here is how scientific publications on noise and health and well-being are growing. What you see here is a literature search. I just did it this morning, and you can see from 1970 to 2013, there were 900 plus papers altogether. So that's a 33-year period. In the last 10 years, we've seen almost double that. So it's very exciting. There's a lot more attention. The science has increased dramatically. And here are some examples of the publications that you see in 2024. You can see transportation noise, cardiovascular effects, impacts on cognition, economic analyses looking at the costs that are borne when we let noise get out of control, distress communities, affect our health, safe noise exposure level to protect hearing. And then interestingly, this last one at the bottom here, strengthening the pillars of cardiovascular health. This article is interesting because it's an indicator that cardiovascular professional organizations like the American Heart Association that publishes the journal Circulation is getting more and more interested in things like environmental and other stressors, because this has an impact on our heart health. It's not just taking cholesterol drugs and triglycerides and monitoring those things. It's these environmental things that can cause enormous stress on our systems and affect huge swaths of the population. This Journal of Exposure Science and Environmental Epidemiology is a special one to us because we were invited to guest edit one of the journals. And so they have special issues. There's examples here: climate change and human exposures, children's health, PFAS chemicals. But what's coming soon is going to be an issue on noise as a public health hazard. And we have a lot of great articles. I believe there's about a dozen or more queued up to be collected and published in this special issue. Some of them are already published, but once we have everything together, they'll be aggregated together. So we're hoping to see that at the end of the year, beginning of next year. I'll touch now on some of the things that we're doing in our programs. In land care, I mentioned that we have an 11-year history of working with the American Green Zone Alliance. This collaboration is focused on transitioning really an entire industry away from fossil fuel equipment. So it's not just, buying the right equipment, it's really training, in many cases, commercial entities to make this transition in a way that is workload and economically feasible for them to do so and stay in business, but with quieter, healthier, more sustainable practices. And with this program, it's a structured program. It has a number of steps. We're interested in creating enduring transitions, not something where somebody goes out, purchases equipment, and says, sorry, it doesn't work. We can't get the work production, it doesn't do the job, our customers aren't satisfied. All of this needs to be addressed if there's going to be a successful transition. So we've done these programs in a number of places. I believe there's 45 what are called AGSA green zones, areas that have made a transition with their hand tools, in some cases also with their mowers. And these are examples. So we're working with municipalities, public school districts, the latest of which is the Los Angeles Unified School District. It's 814 campuses. So it's an enormous transition. The reduction in impacts from transitioning away from gas equipment are very, very significant because the operations are so huge. But we're also working with Howard County, Maryland, colleges and university, different parks and gardens. This is an example from last year, New England Botanic Garden at Tower Hill. They became the first botanic garden to be AGSA Green Zone certified. We had Representative Jim McGovern come and talk about this. It was a wonderful ceremony. And as I mentioned, the impact reductions can be very substantial. So this is an aggregation of reductions in carbon dioxide. So far, 4,400 tons a year of carbon dioxide is avoided by these transitions, equivalent to reducing, taking 852 cars off the road or planting 178,000 trees. We've also reduced toxic pollution, ozone forming compounds, ozone forming exhaust, that's otherwise known as smog, by almost 60 tons per year. And then fine particulate matter, a human carcinogen, by 6.6 tons a year. And needless to say, the battery electric equipment, manual tools, other sustainable practices makes the whole practice of maintaining land much quieter. If you're standing right next to the equipment, not so much, but as soon as you start moving away, that noise drops off dramatically compared to listening to gas-powered equipment. It doesn't come through windows and walls. In land care, we've helped draft legislation. California's small off-road engine ban that was enacted in 2021 to phase out those gas engines, small gas engines, much of which are land care engines. We worked with Senator Cream's office and Representative Michelle Socolo's office to introduce a bill into the Massachusetts state legislature, and hoping that perhaps this year or next that we're going to see something get passed. And with both of those bills, they both incorporate money for education and training, which is very important for the workforce to make this transition successfully. And then at the national level, there's also been a bill introduced. I don't know much about it, except that it's notable that there is a bill introduced at the federal level to help this industry transition. We're also working in aviation. That is a formidable challenge, as you can imagine. We have the FAA, that's the Goliath here, and we are one of several Davids. But one of the things, just to give you an example, we wrote a 40-page public comment to the Federal Aviation Administration, encouraging them to use metrics that were really meaningful in terms of representing the lived experience of communities and how they are suffering from noise. The metrics they currently use are not at all sufficient. They've been widely criticized and have allowed aircraft operations to really increase unabated. So we're hoping that with the other 4,000 or 5,000 comments plus ours, that somehow this is going to make a difference in the future. I know there's a couple of people here on the call that have fought these local fights, but we're trying to support it however we can. We have the Hanscom field proposed expansion that would double capacity and bring in private jet traffic to the area in Massachusetts around Boston. Stop the Chop in New York and New Jersey. We wrote a letter of support for their hearing, are keeping crossed that things will start to go in our favor. We also testified for the state of Maryland in the House and Senate, and happily got them to form a committee to study the impacts of noise and related pollution on health from aircraft. Our community assistance program, as I said, we really try and serve communities, but we're strapped in terms of bandwidth. It's very hard to bring together all the resources that we need to help different communities, but we're doing a number of projects, some of them in rural areas and with poor communities, others, in more affluent communities. And as I mentioned, we have these other programs. I'm not going to say too much today. They're nascent, but hopefully are going to become very active over the next year. I think most of you know that we filed suit against the EPA. This was after several years. And it's all about reactivating the Noise Control Act of 1972 that provided funding for education, funding for research, product regulations and labeling, technical assistance to states and localities and the like, and was very active during the 1970s. We really had leadership on the global level. After it was defunded in 1982, all those activities just ground to a halt. And today there's people, even at EPA, that don't even know there was an office there that was tasked with dealing with noise and carrying out the Noise Control Act. So the statement that you see on this slide, it's the policy of the United States to promote an environment for all Americans free from noise that jeopardize their health or welfare. That is what we're fighting to get back. We know that more and more communities are really suffering. Decision makers, policymakers are really, shrugging. They just don't know what to do. There's no support. People aren't educated about the issue, and the solutions are not at hand. So what does it mean that we no longer have any active federal program? Again, the sorts of things that I mentioned. Quiet product program that was going to start is not a possibility right now. And then keeping up with the science. The Europeans at this point are far ahead with their science. If you look at the literature, most of it comes from other places in the world other than the US. So after a lot of consideration with our legal advisory council, we had discussions with EPA asking them to allocate some money to reactivate the program, starting on a small scale. Those discussions were, I would say, warmly received, but nothing ever happened. And you can imagine after the EPA was gutted under the Trump administration and with all the pressures of climate change, that they have a lot going on. So we decided we had we really didn't have any recourse but to file suit. So working with the University of Washington, that helped us file a petition in 2016. We filed suit in 2023 and are currently in litigation. And I can't say too much more about it. The complaint is a public document. The notice of intent is a public document, and actually you would get a lot out of reading it. So if you go to notice of intent at the EPA website, look under quiet communities, you should be able to find those and see what the rationale is for our complaint and our lawsuit. We've gotten a lot of media attention, especially lately. Scientific American gave us good coverage. Arlene Bronzaf has done many, many podcasts. The latest one is at the top here. I don't know, Trish, can you go through some of these? Because I just am not as well versed here.
Sure. The latest, a lot of them were posted right before July 4th. So it was a very exciting few days leading up to July 4th. But Undark is a online magazine And that piece, Why Scientists Who Study Noise Pollution Are Calling for More Regulation, was picked up by NPR, and that was by Joanne Silberner. This piece on shortwave, how noise pollution from planes, trains, and automobiles can harm human health, is a great listen. You know, many of these are sort of general noise pieces, educating the public, and that's very exciting for us. You know, here's one, how traffic noise hurts children's brains, and that was on BBC, and it's an excellent piece. And then Dan Fink has a Dr. Dan Fink has a piece in the Hearing Journal, and he's had a few, but this one is specific to restaurant noise, rethinking restaurant noise, the case for equal access for noise sensitive people. And this one is sort of, you know, launched the Quiet Restaurants program. So we're using that to get some leverage. So those are the latest. There are more, and if you read Quiet Matters, the newsletter, we highlight them. We also try to send out e-blasts when there's something breaking.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. The couple of things I'll add is really the New York Times coverage over the past year. That's been wonderful. They had a big graphics article that came out last June that maybe some of you saw. We did a lot of work with Emily Baumgartner and her team, as did many of our advisors and some other folks. And they actually had a couple of pieces on Bitcoin mining and data farms, which is a growing problem. These are huge facilities that get very hot indoors, and they have to put lots of ventilation fans to keep them cool. And it's really sickening people in the surrounding communities. People can't sleep. They just feel crazy from the noise because it just is unabating. So we're actually starting to do some work with Earth Justice in that area as well. One problem that we just are becoming more and more aware of are communities that have some type of noise ordinance. It might be source specific, it might be general, or states may have laws, but they are not being enforced. Law enforcement is turning its head, decision makers don't know what to do. And it's something we really start to have to get our heads around, talk with our legal advisory council, build out our network, and see what we can do. And I know that our Quiet Streets program is very concerned with modified exhaust systems, both on motorcycles and cars and trucks for that matter. So this is something that it's a point where we can start to address this, but there's many areas where this is happening. So I think with that, I'll just thank everybody for their membership and for participating. And we'd love to hear your questions and any ideas. We're all in this together.
Thank you, Jamie. There's actually a lead-off question that pertains to your last slide that would be a great place to start. And that's from Jack Edelstein, and he's asking any plans for a class action lawsuit against manufacturers or installers of illegal mufflers?
It's really a better question for our legal advisory council. One thing that we've learned from our work is that class action suits are lovely in concept, especially when there are so many people suffering from the same thing, but there are certain rigorous requirements to class action suits that must be met in order to file them. And I'd like to just punt and, maybe get back to Jack with a better answer once we talk to some folks, but that's what I can say now. Certainly it's a great idea for some of these problems.
Mm-hmm. And if others have questions, a raised hand. Whoops, here's one from Janine. How can we get involved in Quiet Communities projects that interest us? I would say please reach out to, either through our website, we have a contact form, and, we're trying to keep up with the intake, but we do document all of the queries that we receive and we respond. And we are always looking for volunteers. We're always looking to make connections on the ground in communities. So please reach out. Kim, you have your hand raised.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this presentation. It feels like a little bit of a pep talk and keeps us going. So one of the ideas that that I had, when we talk about the lawn maintenance equipment, for example, we certainly have that issue here in Florida and many other places. And where I stumble or where I get caught up in taking any action, because we always have so many priorities and things that we're juggling in our daily lives. One thing that I think would find so helpful is to have a place, a website such as your website, to go to find those persuasive, evidence-based, science-based studies, or a snapshot that would show, provide good talking points and metrics on gas-powered leaf blowers, for example. It's just one example, though, of many issues that I could then package up in a thing, in a email communication with our county commissioners or whoever the appropriate elected officials would be. And it would just help to facilitate our public outreach. So that's my wish list, item. And I know that you all, Jamie and Trish, you've done such great work in this particular area, and it's a pain point for so many communities. So having some talking points, some good research and things kind of packaged up, ready to go, I guess would really help me a lot. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Kim, you're gonna get a call from me very soon.
Okay.
To help with this project. We have so much material on leaf blowers and gas equipment. I didn't go over it because it's not so recent, but we did some research with EPA years ago about the emissions. We developed the healthcare implications of those. That research was then picked up by a U.S. Public Interest Research Group recently. They updated that analysis. It's quite compelling. The health issues for workers are they're pretty extreme. They carry these engines on their back every day, work with other kinds of equipment, and are breathing in and often not wearing hearing protection when the noise levels are, for them, quite deafening. And I know very well it's why I got into this to begin with. So yes, developing more collateral materials that are easy to use and being able to bring them to city council meetings and so forth is a great idea. I think we have some things that could be turned around pretty easily. I would say, though, that one of the things we've tried to do is educate people that there's a whole system, as I touched on before, going on here. It's not just, customers or people that are disturbed. There are customers that want this, that don't care, that may not be home or subject to this noise. There's industry whose business model is really based on high volume gardening and maintenance that is enabled by this very powerful gas equipment and a standard that is just kind of ridiculous. Go to a house, blow the hell out of the soil and whatever, and move on to the next house. It varies to what I grew up with in terms of land care or land maintenance, but here we are, so it makes it complicated like everything else. And so, providing support for industry, having incentives built in, as well as giving that push with community pressure, is really what has made things happen in communities and states. It's all of it together. So anyway, that's probably more than you wanted to hear, but that's
Thank you.
a broader perspective.
And I would add that is a priority, and we're aware, and that's why a forum like this is so helpful to hear the urgency. In a couple of our programs, we've created video resources, and those have been really beneficial. And so I think that as our bandwidth grows, that's our goal, is to create more of that type of resource.
Yeah. I know the other problem, Ken, and I see people like Phyllis here from Princeton. We worked with her and her husband in community several years ago, but in many communities, not all, but in many, even getting gas blowers banned, phased out, restricted, a lot of times those ordinances are not being enforced in their communities. So you have people that say, I worked for 5 or 8 years on this. It's supposedly in effect and nobody's doing anything. They don't have the manpower. They don't want to use a decibel meter if that's the means, or, the guys pack up, the landscapers pack up before they can even go there and see what the problem is. So there's a bunch of things that can make regulation quite difficult.
Thanks, Jamie. And Vincent, you have a similar question about leaf blower, land care resources. So happy to answer that offline. Jamie.
It's a little bit different, if I may.
Okay.
It's not resources so much as an approach. So is there an approach that is more readily adoptable, which allows for maybe a certain transition time? Perhaps it is seasonally based or save the summer based. What would AGZA and Quiet Communities recommend as that first demonstrative step that would help landscapers and residents move away from gas-powered equipment? One that would make sense economically as well as provide health benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. So Vincent, that's a great question. So, communities often look to regulations thinking that will solve the problem, but to begin with, the form of the regulation deserves serious consideration. You want to be fair to industry and also be able to relieve communities from the impacts of gas equipment. So having what you're suggesting, maybe a phase out of some kind over time, that's certainly something that has been more acceptable and has brought industry to the table with communities. The other thing is support, either at a county level, a state level, to help subsidize those equipment purchases in many cases, recognizing that, a lot of the businesses are, 2 people in a truck often. So, some of them clearly have the resources, don't need the subsidies, but a bunch of other businesses could use the subsidies in order to transition. And then there are other considerations in terms of funding, education and training. The electric equipment for commercial use, the blowers in particular, are not as powerful as these very powerful gas blowers. So they're not getting the work production that they're getting with gas. So can they change their practices? Yes, clearly they can. But there's not a lot of creativity in this industry. And behavior change and practice change can be really hard. And there can be a lot of resistance to doing so. So, you know, in California, they have the benefit of an environmental penalty fund to subsidize exchanges. And they are able to pay 70% of the cost of a lot of the a lot of the electric equipment that they're asking landscapers to use. We don't have the benefit of that in almost all other states, as far as I know. Certainly approaching state legislatures about this problem, I think, is very important to raise awareness. We've done it in Massachusetts. I know they're trying to do the same in New Jersey now. There's been some noise made in Illinois about it, in Colorado and so forth. But having a, you know, a balanced approach that, you know, that push and pull, I really think is the way to get it done.
Thanks, Jamie.
I'll say one more thing that's a point of interest. It was brought to our attention the concept of technology forcing. And this goes back to the noise control program that was effective during the 1970s. One of the things that's been done in air pollution under the Clean Air Act is that the EPA sets standards that cannot be met with current technology. And what happens is when new standards are created, industry is forced to develop technology in order to meet those standards. So imagine if we had had a standard under the Noise Control Act that had said this kind of equipment cannot be more than 65 decibels, let's say. It would be a very different scene today. We may not be dealing with this problem, and it may have accelerated electrification by the industry. So it all kind of ties together.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from Frank Allen, and then Mike, I'll pose your question.
Trish, if we could also get to Phyllis, because I
Yes.
mentioned her name with regard to, you know, regulation in Princeton, and I know that she'll have a comment about that as well.
Yes, and Phyllis is third in the queue. So Frank, you're on.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First of all, when I was working in industrial noise control back in the 80s, there were the regulations in place where the industrial users were supposed to meet certain limits of boundary lines. And HVAC systems like at these so-called Bitcoin manufacturing sites like in Virginia would not be permitted to be at these levels. It'd be easy, the technology's there right now. So I think the lawsuit is appropriate. Second, it would be kind of nice if there were very, very short little videos that we could do to present to groups like there's a group called Healthy St. Mary's. They're back in the 19th century as far as environmental health is concerned. But if I could have a little video that I could present to those folks from you guys, that would help a lot. Third, I'm on the Land Trust Alliance community. I'm president of a local land trust as well as working on bicycling. There's a quiet form of transportation. And the Land Trust has its annual rally. This year it's at Providence, Rhode Island. And have you reached out to the Land Trust community, or would you like me to?
We would love it if you did. I mean, in my personal work, I am in touch with Land Trust, you know, contacts locally. But if you, that's another benefit of a conversation like this one, is we welcome your contacts as well as your ideas. So please, by all means.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you so much. So Mike has a question, and I'm not sure, Jamie, if we have the answer about the lawsuit by Utah physicians for social responsibility against muffler and exhaust distributors, but that is a question we can also answer offline with help from some of our advisors.
Yeah, so hi, Mike. I know that you and Neil have probably talked about this, and yes, we are aware of it, but and Reed Zars has joined our legal advisory council, which is great. He's the attorney representing Utah physicians for, I don't know, whatever it is it social responsibility or healthy environment that are suing distributors or dealers of aftermarket parts that are illegal. Yeah, so we can certainly have this discussion offline.
That would be great. We're watching those developments very quickly, very closely. So let's see. Okay, so Phyllis, your turn. Thank you.
Well, since I was mentioned, my husband and I set up Quiet Princeton in Princeton, New Jersey in 2016. We got tremendous help and support from Jamie Banks and Quiet Communities. And we did learn some lessons that might be useful to other people. One question that was asked, and I don't think it was answered just in this session, was about enforcement. What do you do about enforcement? And we determined that using the police, trying to enforce, even if we got a gas leaf blower ordinance, which we didn't have initially, but even if we got one, it was just hopeless to ask the police to enforce it. The police are not interested in noise things. They by the time they arrive, it's too late. It just would not work. We persuaded our government to set up a community compliance officer. This was a new position. We had a very helpful council member who worked on this. And the community compliance officer is the main person who enforces our seasonal leaf blower ban. And she does it through education. She gives warnings. She talks to the landscapers. Our ordinance penalizes both the landscaper and the homeowner who hired the landscaper, or a homeowner who does his or her own leaf blowing. So this is a very persuasive way to get the landscapers and the homeowners to get on board with the seasonal ban. So I would recommend, and this compliance officer is set up to do code enforcement of many other codes that the town has. It isn't just the leaf blowers. The second point I would make that we found was most useful was educating the public about the stupidity of the current standards in lawn care. My husband developed a word for it, plastic landscaping. Plastic landscaping looks like, it's made out of styrofoam. There's no single leaf or twig anywhere. And this has become the standard. The landscapers think that the customers want it. Some customers do, but many customers don't particularly want it, but the landscaper thinks they want it. And this is a circular thing. Educating the homeowners who are going to hire the landscapers that this is not attractive. This is not the way to go with your land. We have gotten people to get rid of lawns. We have a wonderful organization in Princeton, a nonprofit called Sustainable Princeton, which has done enormous amounts of education. Quiet Princeton is a tiny organization. We couldn't have possibly done this, but educating people to see that having some leaves on the lawn, having native plants instead of grass, ground cover is much more attractive. And it's really making inroads. You walk around Princeton and there are all these non-lawn front lawns that are that don't need leaf blowing. In fact, they wouldn't benefit from leaf blowing. So those are just two things: the compliance officer and the education of the homeowners that I would recommend to other communities.
Yeah, thanks, Phyllis.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. And I think we'll be calling you for input because we do have communities that, Quiet Land Care is working with who are struggling with those same issues of enforcement and not just with land care, but with our other programs. So that's very helpful. There's a question from Colin Ruff. Will the Quiet Streets Initiative also address preventable noise such as horn alerts with vehicle locking and truck reverse gear warnings that are audible hundreds of yards away? And the answer is yes. It's all neighborhood related street noise, and our program chair, Mary Tatesian, who, as Jamie pointed out, started Quiet Florida, is just an excellent research resource and activist. So you're going to be hearing more from her. In fact, we thought we're already talking about doing a close-up conversation like this with her. So Jamie, did you?
And just to add, Mary's from Naples, Florida.
Yes.
And she's really been amazing. She has been able through education, discussions with her local representatives to make progress, and now has been able to get the ears of state legislators. So yeah, I think having that conversation with her would be wonderful. We're contemplating having a national conference to address this kind of street noise. So you'll be hearing from us about that as well.
Yes. This question from Thomas Morris, and then I'll go back to you, Kim. Noise Free America began work several years ago on a class action suit against makers of illegal exhaust systems. And I think that Jamie, you answered that. Neil, if you have something, how far has this progressed?
Or maybe Mike too, I don't know. Neil, do you want to take a stab at that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You know, we've been following it for a while, and the attorney Reed Zars had a big win with regards to a television program. I forgot the name of it. That was espousing exhaust, etc. So he's knowledgeable in the space. It's been ongoing. I think that it's in the court system with endless reviews and goings on back and forth. So I don't know that there's been any substantive progress to report on recently, but he is aggressively pursuing this, and it's an absolutely fascinating case. And if he wins, it'll be very significant. So I've spoken with him a number of times, and he's very impressive.
Great, and we'll amplify any news from that story. And Thomas, I see your follow-up question. Let's see, published ago. Oh, Neil has shared that publication, and we actually shared it in our newsletter. And we can do so again. It certainly should be posted on the website. So
why don't you just say what it is, Trish, for the benefit of everybody?
Yes, I have my copy somewhere close by, but I'm
I
not
can get
sure.
mine. I'll get mine. Hold on.
Thank you. I don't have, oh, here it is. It's the Guide to Modified Exhaust Systems, a reference for law enforcement officers and motor vehicle inspectors. And it really lays out with photos sort of how these systems are. And Neil has his handy too, so.
Can you, I don't know if you can see it, but it's the Guide to Modified Exhaust Systems, and it's an extraordinary resource. Noise Free America was involved with its production, and it's a very short book. However, it does a wonderful job of helping people to understand the issue and helping law enforcement specifically to be able to recognize what is legal under the EPA and what is not. So it's a great resource.
Thanks, Neil. And Kim, I see your hand.
Okay, this is great. Couple of follow-up comments. So I really appreciated Phyllis's comments so much. I wish we could go to lunch. Couple of things. So, our lawn care companies, this is really just an extension of the agrochemical industry. And the way that they operate is through this factory model of doing every yard the same. I think one of the issues, the problems, is that there are few alternatives for homeowners if they don't want to go that route and they're not gardeners. So in addition to my own home property, I hire landscapers for a very large condominium complex. And I've been fighting this battle for many years, required them to phase out the gas-powered leaf blowers. They wouldn't do it. And finally they said, well, if you'll subsidize it or buy them, we'll use them. So the comment that Jamie made about the subsidies and all that, that's right on. Of course, most people can't do that. So we are transitioning the entire landscape for whatever 20 acres to be more low maintenance. The code enforcement comment is just absolutely spot on. But having that policy brief or guidance from a trusted source like your group really helps activists, advocates to get to that point and ask for that code enforcement element. Our county government here in Brevard County, they updated the noise ordinance and improved it dramatically, but then carved out an exemption for lawn care equipment. Okay, so anyway, I am a member of our Florida Native Plant Society. I'm giving a brief presentation on that. And as I was researching a specific issue, I was able to use a policy brief that had been prepared by the Florida Native Plant Society that helped me to advocate for certain policies. So really, I'm just kind of tightening up my earlier comments, and moving into this policy brief would be so helpful on these various issues. So I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
Yeah,
It tells people what they should ask for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we can talk about that for sure.
That would be great. And our collaboration with Wild Ones is going to be such a great resource on that front as well. Neil and then Harold.
Yeah, just a quick, very positive thing for people to be aware of. If you want to see tangible evidence of the progress being made in this space, go to Walmart, go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot. The products that are being sold, you know, the facings probably about 90% now are electric at those stores for consumers. It is becoming difficult to find a two-stroke or a four-stroke powered lawn equipment product. So, you know, real evidence that there's progress here, and you know, without the supply of those products, the quieter products are only going to become, and healthier products going to become more prolific.
Thanks, Neil. We have someone working on a blog on just that. So, and
I would just add, Trish, before we move on, the transition for homeowners has been pretty simple. You know, they don't use the equipment but once every, I don't know, every week. You know, it's a very different story with the commercial industry. But I think the most resistance comes from small businesses, institutions like schools, municipal operations, where you have, you know, funding for this equipment, you have a structure in order to provide education and so forth, you have proper electrical infrastructure, all the things needed to make this happen. But it's the small businesses that really, you know, need a different approach.
thank you, Jamie. And Harold?
Oh, Harold, you're muted.
Yes, sorry.
I'm quite interested in the Florida Native Plant Society's upcoming paper on alternatives to lawns. I'd like to submit it to the North American Native Plant Society, which is basically a Canada-based organization with, I don't know how many members, something. I think it's hovering around 1,000 or 600. I don't know for sure. But I think it would be of tremendous value. The next thing I want to mention is that a couple of us, maybe 30 or 25 people deputed before the Toronto Board of Health yesterday about the issue of noise, and we've been urging public health to take noise seriously and act on it, educate the public, speak out. The last time they posted anything on Twitter was 7 years ago. I don't know what's going to happen. Things happen slowly, as you know, in government. But there's a group called No More Noise Toronto that organized and it's got 1,300 members, which was organized in a very short period of time. And it's organized to persuade City Hall to act on noise, because the noise issues in Toronto are the same all over North America. Loud mufflers, leaf blowers, the whole construction. It's just gone crazy. And there's a bit of good news. The Toronto District School Board is in the process of transitioning to battery-powered lawn care equipment. I was going to say garden, but they don't really have many gardens there for schools. And that's it.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I'll try to get that information from Kim and share it broadly. I really like that concept. So I think that we're a couple minutes over. I think we would like to try to keep this to an hour. I see all of the other comments and we'll respond offline to some of those. I love your idea, Vincent, about the redemption funds, etc. It looks like, Neil, do you have another question? We're just about to close up.
Yeah, so I just Googled about the lawsuit in Utah, and this was as of July 1st. A federal judge in Utah Monday ruled that an environmental nonprofit has standing to pursue most of its claims that Harley-Davidson dealerships that sell motorcycles without catalytic converters in the Wasatch Front area of the state are polluting the air. But it can't continue with the claim that the bikes are so loud that they violate federal law. So that is hot off the presses. And in this case, what's going on is that Reed was very smart in that he got involved with both issues, noise and air pollution. So we may be able to have a win by writing off of the Clean Air Act. So just a quick update earlier this week.
That's great, Neil. And if you share it with our bloggers or just send it to me, we can share that with the rest of our broader community. So I just want to thank you for coming to our first close-up event. And we look forward to having many more conversations like this where we can share ideas and really hear from you what feels most urgent. It's very helpful. And our lines are open. Jamie, would you like to say something?
Well, I just want to thank everybody as well. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks for all the questions and thanks for the ideas. I think it's nice to bring people together and have this kind of sharing and kind of keep the optimism.
Great. Thank you all. Take good care.
Thank you.